Honestly, I just started doing this yesterday.
You like start a project and finish it. I don't understand what that must be like.
I don't often. I almost gave up yesterday. I restarted this like 12 times because I wanted to make a blanket, and then I realised that it's a lot harder to make a blanket when you're knitting on your fingers. So I thought I would try and do something
I'm
smaller.
gonna. I know what I want you to make me. I actually can make them, so I'll make you one too because I can knit them.
Okay,
I want you to make
I don't know
me a
if I
headband. They're
okay
really easy.
okay, but I'm very new at this,
I
so
know, and look at what you've made already. You
it's
literally start something and you can
it,
master it in 24 hours. You know that
it's
that's not fair.
it's the
And people
most.
like me, I've started 24 crafts in the last 6 weeks. Do you know how many I've finished? None.
I hyperfixate. We're on like different ends of the ADHD spectrum.
I hyperfixate for 24 hours and then I'm like, well, that was fun. Enjoyed that. Spent 300 quid on that new project and now I'm done. Okay, hello and welcome to our podcast 20s. You have to look at the camera while we do the intro at least.
Okay, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
Rosie's got a new hobby.
Look at me, I'm literally in my dressing gown knitting with my fingers. I cannot.
This is why you're my favourite person in the world.
I'm a granny.
You're so clever. Hello and welcome to our
26 to
podcast.
life.
The podcast where Rosie and I
Have
tell
been
each other true crime stories.
and been friends for longer than a life sentence.
And been friends for longer than a life sentence. I think we're just going to have to start ad-libbing that because I can't ever remember the script anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm Catherine.
I'm Rosie.
Before we get into this, please go and follow us on everything. We are 26tolife_pod on TikTok and Instagram, and we are 26tolifepod on YouTube and Spotify. So follow us on everything, leave us nice comments, etc., etc., etc. This episode, well, this podcast always contains difficult topics, but today it's really bad as well. So please only listen when you are feeling up to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's dark. Rose, when I say the word Ripper, what do you think of?
Jack the Ripper.
Why do you think he was called Jack the Ripper?
Is it not because he used to like all of his victims were like disemboweled, weren't they? And
Right.
so I that's why I thought, but I guess now that doesn't necessarily make sense now I'm thinking about that retrospectively, but why?
Yeah, so that's what I always thought. The reason I'm asking is because we're not looking at Jack the Ripper. We are looking at a different Ripper. And like you said, I always thought it meant, like that name came because he disemboweled them, so on and so forth. And this serial killer, while he occasionally did that, that wasn't like his MO with everything.
Wow, you
Do you know
really
what I mean?
tricked me there, didn't you? You were like setting me up for Jack the Ripper and then
Well,
doing something completely different.
I do want to do Jack the Ripper at some point because I've taught Jack the Ripper from the female perspective, and I think it's really interesting about kind of women in society.
Yeah.
However,
yeah.
and also there's like a documentary on BBC about the case being reopened, and you sent me an article the other day about how they've got new evidence and they think it might be this, and then I have read up on quite a lot of the different suspects, and I just think I want to do it, but I just don't think I'm ready to do it yet because
it's a
I
lot.
just am not there yet. It's a lot, and however, this one is also called like the Ripper, but we are not in the East End, which is where Jack the Ripper was. We are in West Yorkshire.
The Yorkshire Ripper?
Do you know this story?
No, I've just seen it come up a couple. Well, I think I do kind of know it, but not enough. Not enough at all. No, definitely not.
Do you know the name of the Yorkshire Ripper? Great, fine.
No.
She doesn't. She doesn't know it. She doesn't. Okay. Now Yorkshire is absolutely gorgeous. I'll be honest. The thing I had the most difficulty with this episode is the fact that I am terrible at geography, and I was getting so confused by this because it was quite important, like where they were and where the bodies were found. So can you first just explain, because Rosie's quite good at geography, where is West Yorkshire in the UK?
Oh my gosh, West Yorkshire is kind of like north of England and kind of like in the middle. Is that right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean it's basically just smack bang in the middle of the north of England.
And when you think of Yorkshire, like, what do you think?
I'm thinking I can think of their accent, but I cannot do it. I'm not even gonna. Don't even ask me to try and do their accent.
They kind
But
of
I
talk
think
out the
of
side
like
of their mouth
farmers
sometimes.
and just like kind people. Like I feel like Yorkshire people are all just like quite friendly and outgoing, like
Mm,
charming. Like
mm.
that kind of thing. Yeah.
And like, what's the scenery? What's the look of the place?
Oh, it's lots of countryside across Yorkshire. It's beautiful. It's like, oh, it's so nice. My Jack's parents live in Yorkshire, and I just love going to visit because you just sort of drive through countryside, and you can literally just leave their house, and you
Dog walks.
yeah, dog walks across fields. It's so pretty. It's pretty flat. It's not like Scotland,
Mm.
like hilly, but it's pretty flat. But I think the English countryside is beautiful, honestly.
It so is. And so we are in West Yorkshire for some of this case. Now, West Yorkshire after World War Two, really vibrant area. Had it was a huge part of the Industrial Revolution. They had textiles and machinery and trains and really became an affluent
Yeah.
area. However, by the time we're looking at, it's the 70s and it's really started to decline. And I think in the area that we're going to look at, especially, there's about 21% of adults who are unemployed,
Oh.
and a lot of the wealth has moved away from this area.
Hmm.
So, 1975, we're in Leeds. It's the 29th of October. Did you know that Leeds was in Yorkshire?
Yes, we had this
I
discussion with Leanne
I think we
Tiernan.
did, but the amount of places that I was like, oh, I I thought Leeds was more central, and I thought Yorkshire was way more north.
I
Anyway,
think
we're
it's
in
like quite
Leeds.
common for, I think in England, a lot of people in London, because I would know that I was guilty of this as well. You don't really know where much is around England because we're so close to the centre that first of all, we don't really have to go anywhere else. And second of all, why are you going to go on holiday to the rest of England when you're so close to like Stansted and Gatwick and Luton
Yeah,
and
but then you
Tishby?
say that, but then I went on a walking holiday with the dog in
When?
the Goathland waterfalls in Yorkshire, and it was absolutely beautiful with three of the girls I used to work with, and it was stunning. Like, I absolutely loved it.
You still
But
don't know where Leeds is?
I still don't know where Leeds is. I'm pretty sure a friend of mine was at Leeds University and I drove there. Is it near Alton Towers?
No.
Yeah. No, maybe I didn't drive to Leeds University.
You're funny. Go on.
Anyway, 29th of October 1975, we have a single mother of four children. She's 28 years old and her name is Wilma McCann.
Wilma.
Now, I know, what a cute name.
That is really cute.
Now, Wilma had four children, like I said, and she had been married, but her husband was just a bit of a douche. And he was a drinker, he was a gambler, he was quite abusive physically and verbally. And so 1974 they split up. They got divorced. So now she's a single mum in this area that in the 70s is really, really, really hard.
Hmm. And
You
she
know,
has all four kids with her still.
she has
They're all-
all four
Yeah.
kids with her. They actually don't even mention like where the dad is.
Yeah.
And they're young kids as well. I mean, you can imagine she's only 28, so I think they were like
Oh, yeah.
5 and 6, like really young children.
Hmm.
So at 1 a.m. on the morning of the 30th, Wilma comes out of a nightclub, and it's called the Room at the Top nightclub. I honestly, some of the things in this, so I've read articles and I also watched a documentary, and it's all just really wild. And she runs in front of somebody's car and they have to stop, and she goes, "Oh, can you give me a lift to Chapel Town?" Now, Chapel Town is what is referred to as their red light district, so where a lot of they refer to them as prostitutes. I understand that we call them sex workers, but for this, I'm going to call them prostitutes because that is what they are referred to in all of this, and it's
Hmm.
kind of more indicative of the time. And she asks for a lift there, And this is where, 21% of the adult population is unemployed. There is also a majority of a black population. Wilma's white, but is a majority black population, and they do not have a good relationship with the police, which makes this even harder to deal with. And it's an area of massive poverty, so there is a lot of sex workers in this area. But it's the middle of the week, and the 4 children are asleep in the house, and the 6-year-old girl, she goes and wakes up her little brother, who's 5. His name's Richard. And she's like, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. Mum's not home. We're going to go and look for her.
Oh,
I was
God.
like, this is wild. Can you imagine being 5 and 6 and just trotting out into the street to go and look for your mum to see
At
where...
5 o'clock in the morning?
5 o'clock in the morning, I know. And that also must be scary, because in what world is a child waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning because not sure if their mum's not there? That, to me, shows a sign of, like, you don't have that sense of security that other people have. And, I mean, because can you imagine Leo waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning and being like, where's mum?
Yeah.
No, it just wouldn't happen. Like, unless he was having a nightmare, he wouldn't wake up and think, why is mum not home?
Yeah. He would think, he would just get into your bed and wait for you to come back in, because he's like, she's probably downstairs.
She's obviously gone to the loo, or he wouldn't be worried. Richard says, they did not have a lot of money, and they lived in a council house, and they never really got attention. They never really, from the local people, and all of a sudden people are being so nice to them and making them tea and making them hot chocolate, and he's like, this is so nice. And then a police officer sits them down and says, look, mummy's been taken to heaven, and you're not going to see her again. And
that's so heartbreaking.
It turns out that Wilma was found 150 yards from their family home while her children were at home. She's actually been found in a playing field. So this is, you'll notice there's a really common theme. The murderer wants the bodies to be found. I think there's actually 1 or 2 where it's like, oh, okay, they're a bit more hidden. But in general, it seems to be that they want them to be in really, really prominent areas that someone's going to walk past.
Sicko.
And so her body goes to the pathologist, and they find out that she's been hit twice in the head. She has 2 stab wounds in, they say her breast, but I think they just mean like her chest area, like that whole breastbone area, and once in her abdomen. But they say
she's been stabbed 3 times.
So she's been stabbed 3 times, all in very, very vital places, like your abdomen and your chest. It's severe. But they say it's even more, I don't know if gruesome's the right word, but obviously, you know how people talk about when you stab someone, it's a very personal way to kill them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's not like shooting them. And they're saying that this was so telling about the type of person that it was who was doing it, because not only had they stabbed them, but once the knife had gone in, they really moved the knife around. So it felt very kind of, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for?
Savage. Like, it is
Savage.
brutal.
Yeah, and it's also like there's an element of enjoyment. I don't know. I can't say, but it's just
like savouring it, like really like getting some kind of like out of it.
Exactly.
Oh, God,
exactly. But they also say that there's no fibres, no trace evidence. And I was thinking 1974, is there a huge amount of 1975? Is there a huge amount they'd be able to pick up? But they don't find anything. They do a search, and they have to kind of line up all the police officers. All of them go through every single blade of grass. There's no CCTV, and there's a lot of footage of these times. They've all got the long sideburns, and they've got the very classic police outfit. They do look hilarious, actually. But because she had been found so near to Chapeltown, they immediately think she's a prostitute. And the issue with the fact that she was a prostitute means that not many people care about it.
Yeah.
Because, sadly...
But wait, was she a prostitute?
She was a prostitute.
Oh, okay, yeah.
She was. But it kind of doesn't really matter in this case, because when they're prostitutes, they don't care, and when they're not prostitutes, they think, oh well, they must secretly be prostitutes. There's only one time that they do. So it's just so it's really hard. But the police, and even the police, you know, when they're talking about it in all their interviews, they're saying how much this bothered them and that bothered them, and I'm sure there was an element that did, but there are also a lot of things that I've read into where actually they ignored a lot of things because of who these women were.
Yeah, and really, like, it shouldn't matter at the end of the day. Like, a murder is a murder. Like, it shouldn't matter, like, whether or not they were a prostitute or what their background was. Like, that's just irks me.
But I don't know whether they're saying it's because they're a prostitute or whether they're saying, like, it's because they put themselves in a vulnerable position, you know, kind of, oh, what do you expect to happen? I'm not entirely sure why they kind of have this attitude, but they do. And the way I see it is, you're in an area where it's very, very low income anyway, very hard to get jobs, then add into the fact that you are a single parent in that situation, and then add into the fact that we're in the 1970s, so for you to find a job would be a lot harder, you know, as a woman. And if you are going to find a job, it's going to be something very low paid. You've got to feed your children.
Yeah, what else are you supposed to do?
And while she'd
four of them, no less.
And while she'd been married, there had been times that the kids she'd still been struggling so much with the abuse of her husband that the kids had ended up going into foster care anyway for periods of time because she was just struggling so much. And her son even talks about times that they were taken into social services and their mum said, you're going to have to take these children unless you give me some money for them, because I just can't, I can't cope.
It just goes to show how much she really did care, because she was willing to give them up, knowing that they would be better cared for with somebody else. Like, that really takes such bravery, such courage to do that. Like, oh, poor woman. She must have been going through
absolutely tragic. Oh, I'm going to say something now which is not good, but basically, obviously, they go into a children's home, orphanage. This house is so beautiful. And obviously at the time for those children it wouldn't have been considered beautiful. It looks like one of those like Georgian or Victorian mansions that you can imagine the thunder striking as they drive in. Like, you know, series of unfortunate events kind of thing.
I was literally just thinking of that.
My goodness. I can imagine that this house now, if that was renovated into something, it must be stunning.
But I hate that. I
hate that they went into a children's home, but I loved this house. But we're going to leave Wilma McCann there, and we're going to move on to January of 1976, and we have Emily Jackson, who is a mother of 3.
Wait, so remind me, how long after this is Wilma?
So Wilma was October 75. October 75, and now we're January 76. So not that long after. Yeah, a couple of months.
Few months, yeah.
She was a mother of 3 and she was married. However, her husband had a failing business and they were just about to be declared bankrupt. And so they agreed that that's what she would, she was going to work as a sex worker.
Wow.
What she would do is she would take the family's van, because she didn't want to take anyone back to the home, and she would take it into Leeds, and that's where she would conduct her business.
Oh, poor woman.
There is a club called the club or a pub, and it's called the Gaiety Pub, and it was really well known for strippers, and they talk about it like it's super salacious and kinky, but basically, from what I understand, it's BDSM.
Sure.
And it's women wearing like leather and having whips and stuff.
Okay.
Which, if that's your vibe, that's your vibe,
Yeah. No judgment
you do
here.
good. And I think also there was probably still that attitude that BDSM was all about sort of killing people and murder and hurting people, which we know that it is not.
Yeah, I mean, there's still that, isn't there? Like,
there is, yeah.
stupid. But yeah, I guess
But
in 1970 it was still early days for it.
exactly. And so, because it was that type of place, they probably quite rightly assumed that prostitutes would have worked out of there and would have gone and found clients in there. And Emily Jackson, she was outside of the Gaiety pub, and a man whose car had broken down, she's having a look into his engine. Don't know why she's looking in his engine, unless she's like mechanically minded. Can you imagine?
I mean, that's the type of thing that I would do. I love things like that, though. I would be like, let me take a look, just thinking that I could figure it out just by looking at it.
You can't.
I mean, sometimes you can. Not with cars, maybe, but with like other things. Sometimes if like
No,
something's
I get
broken,
that.
I'll be the one to open it up and look and be like, yeah, you just have to
Oh, I do
figure
things
this
like that
out.
all the time. I convinced Jay the other day that I'd fixed the boiler, and he said, "What did you do?" And I said, "I pressed every single button,
Yeah,
and it worked."
done. You just saved
And
yourself
then,
like 200 quid.
literally, I know.
So she's
Um,
looking in his car.
I think for me, it's not that. For me, it's the fact that I'm too anxious and I'm too aware of people around me. That if a man said to me, "My car's broken down," my immediate thing would be, "You do not ask a woman alone
Oh,
at
yeah.
night to
Yeah.
help you with your car."
No,
Now,
fair enough.
my thinking would be like, let's say, for example, my dad's car broke down. He would know not to approach a young woman on her own to ask for help with the car. My
Well,
dad is
yeah.
completely useless with cars, but he would know that that would be scary for a woman. So to me,
Yeah.
it's not so much of like a sexist thing of a woman wouldn't know anything about a car. For me, it's kind of,
Like,
I
why
just don't
would
think
you
you
not?
have good intentions in that
Yeah.
situation. You would walk into a shop, or you would walk over to somebody who was in a group. You just wouldn't do that.
Yeah, it almost seems like a trap, doesn't it?
Funny you should say that, because as she's peering into the engine, he
Yeah.
hits her in the back of the head. Her body is found behind a bakery, and at first they can't identify her, so they ask anyone, "If you know this description of a woman, please can you come forwards?" And this
But
is the description that they
wait,
give out.
they can't identify her because they just don't know who she is and she doesn't have ID on her, or because
Yeah.
she's
No, no,
been
no, no, no.
like, okay, okay.
No. At first, they just can't identify her because she doesn't have
They
anything on
just
her.
genuinely don't know who she is. Okay.
Yeah. And obviously, no one's filed a missing persons thing. And,
Yeah.
like, that must also be really hard because you go missing and that's your line of work. People would be nervous to do that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so, do you want to know the description they give of her?
Oh, go on.
Honestly, you can tell that the police now are taught how to deal with the press, because in all of the news interviews, these police officers are so stupid, it's unbelievable. But also, the people interviewing them and interviewing the families are so stupid, it's painful. So they say, "If anybody knows this description of this woman, please could you come forwards? Light brown hair and in her mid-40s.
What?
That was it. But they say they don't think it was sexual. There's no evidence that she was sexually assaulted, and there's no evidence of a robbery. Now,
So
Neil
everyone
Jackson
then calls their wives, literally
Yeah.
every single man in the whole of this area, in the whole of Yorkshire, calls their wives from work to make sure that they're alive because
literally that.
Stupid. Okay, go on.
And then her son, I think he was 17 at the time, which I think is awful. They find out who she is because obviously then they realise that she's missing and da-da-da-da-da. The son has to go and identify her.
Wait. Ah, okay, no, wait. Oh, sorry, I was getting confused. Yep, go on. 17.
The son goes to identify her, which
That's
I just thought, that's
awful.
awful. Why are you sending the kid to do that? I know he's 17, but come
Yeah,
on.
where's her husband?
I know. The one whose business was failing, he was about to be prosecuted for it, and she was...
Yeah.
Oh. She was having to do awful things.
Sell herself, yeah, for his failing business.
She had been stabbed 56 times. She has 2 fractures to her head. There's also a shoe print on her thigh, and they say there's no reason for that shoe print. 2 fractures to the skull, 56 stab wounds, standing or stamping on her thigh just kind of gives the impression of anger, hatred, really just sort of wants to,
yeah,
you know, like
but
we said with the last one.
With the stab and the turn, and
really wants to just feel it and like let their anger out. But some of the wounds are cross-shaped, so little tiny crosses like that. What do you know? What?
I was thinking about the time that your brother threw a Phillips screwdriver at my head, and I had a tiny cross-shaped scar above my eyebrow.
I don't remember this, but what do you think they think she's been stabbed with?
A Phillips screwdriver.
A Phillips screwdriver. Yeah.
Shut up! You don't remember your brother throwing a Phillips screwdriver
Vaguely.
at my head?
Tell me again.
He hid behind a door and then jumped out and threw. In fact, I think it was behind that exact door that you're sitting in front of. He threw the Phillips screwdriver at my head, and it was like.
How old was he?
I can't remember. It couldn't have been that old because you were still living in that house.
So if I lived here until I was 10, and so the oldest he could have been was 4.
Yeah. And then he jumped out and he threw it at my head, and then I had it was bleeding here. It was literally right here. It could have gone in my eyeball. And your dad, obviously being like a wonderful doctor, called my mum, was like, she's bleeding, but I don't think she needs to go to the doctors or anything like that. My mum was like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, fine. And then I remember that I had, once he cleaned it up and everything, it was like a perfect little square, cross of a Phillips screwdriver. And I remember that the scab came off in the night, and I was so disappointed because I wanted to keep this little X scab. But for the longest time, I had a scar that was like X marked. Your dad will remember that for sure. Your dad will 100% remember that.
I'm surprised your mum let you come over after that.
I mean, I'm surprised I still have my eyeball. And honestly, I think she was just glad to be rid of me.
Imagine a journalist asks the police officer, what do you think you know about this person? He is a man who eats prostitutes, was his response. Was that a good Yorkshire accent?
No.
Ah!
I didn't know what kind of accent you're doing, but I got
It's a man. No, I thought that was quite good. Anyway. The journalist asked, what do they know about this person? And he literally, that's his response. He says, he is a man who hates prostitutes. And I just think, is that it? That's all you've got?
Like, great investigative work here going on.
Exactly. And he's got size 7 shoes.
Brilliant.
This really annoyed me because when I originally watched it, there was not a mention of this young woman, 20-year-old Marcella Claxton. And she's walking home from a house party in Leeds, and she's 4 months pregnant. And they don't mention her in the documentary, and I thought, let me go and find out and corroborate the stories and whatnot. And this did happen. She was offered a lift, and I think it's because they're trying to avoid the ones where the police don't look very good. She was offered a lift and she accepted it. Now, obviously, we know now we would never do something like this and blah, 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 blah. But at the time, the 70s, I feel like that was the height of kind of hitchhiking and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I feel like because you don't have cell phones, who am I? Because you don't have a mobile, because you don't have a mobile phone as well, like, it's harder for you to get around. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I feel like it would have been more normal to hitchhike and get lifts from strangers.
But she would, this guy offered her a lift. And also, the other thing you will see is all of these women who talk about this man, because there are survivors, and all of them, even who die, they obviously felt that he was trustworthy and safe in some way. Yeah. And that becomes quite a running theme. She gets out of the car to go for a pee, which I thought odd.
Okay.
But then I suppose pregnant, maybe she's absolutely busting. She is hit in the back of the head with a hammer. Now, she manages to crawl away, and she hides in a phone box and she manages to get help. However, she does lose the baby and she's treated awfully afterwards. So the chief superintendent says, she's a liar, you're obviously just a sex worker. He dismissed the e-fit. It's not called an e-fit when it's drawn by hand, like the facial thing.
Artists, sketch.
Yeah, the sketch artist, that,
Yeah.
Composite sketch.
Composite.
Yeah, they dismissed that. They're like, yeah, no, don't worry. Even though they later find out this was an accurate image of the murderer. Yeah. And she just said it was awful. She said afterwards, everyone thought I was a prostitute. Nobody believed me that I wasn't a prostitute because this man had tried to kill me.
Yeah, because they thought any young woman someone who's trying to kill has to be a prostitute because that's what this man is doing. He's only attempting to kill.
Even though we later see that that's not necessarily the case and he makes a mistake all the time.
Yeah, but is it that he's targeting prostitutes specifically? Yeah. Or, okay, so I didn't know if it was just that he was targeting young women.
Which we kind of don't know at the time, but so far 2 prostitutes have been killed. He assumes that if a woman is out walking alone at night and willing to take a lift from a man, well, she must be a sex worker. Yeah. It's kind of the vibe I get. We now get to April 1977, and a dog walker is out walking, and they find another body. And all of her stuff has been very neatly taken out of her bag and placed around her. There's no sign of a sexual assault. And this woman is 28-year-old Irene Richardson. I hate how they talk about these people. So there is a journalist who's just gross, and he's like, how are we going to find a headline that really reels people in? We need to, get them reading, and we know, and then he later says, we know that this is all going to be just fish and chip news by tomorrow because they are only sex workers. So blah, blah, blah. He's fish awful. He's absolutely
news. Do you know why they call it fish and chip news?
Yeah, because they wrap fish and chips in the newspaper.
Yeah. I feel like some people who are not English wouldn't know that.
Oh, right, sorry. Yeah, so, but that's what he's saying, is he's saying by tomorrow, this will be used to wrap the fish and chips up in, so don't worry about it too much. So how can we get people to be really interested in it? So that's why the journalists start calling him the Yorkshire Ripper, because Jack the Ripper was such a famous case, and everybody was intrigued by Jack the Ripper. So what, how are we going to make it so that everyone's as involved as they were with that?
Yeah.
We're going to call him the Yorkshire Ripper. We now go to our next victim, and her name is Patricia Atkinson. She's 33 years old, and she had been at a hotel on a Saturday night until just before closing time. And that was the last time she was seen. And she is then killed inside of her own flat. And this is quite different because no one else has been killed inside of their home yet.
Yeah.
But also, this is another sign that he was trustworthy enough. He was able to make them feel comfortable enough to let them in the home.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to know what the journalist's question is for this one?
What?
Could it be that he is a maniac?
Yeah, he's obviously a maniac.
That's the journalist's question to the police officer.
What? What is going on?
I don't know. I don't know if they had journalism degrees at this point.
Yeah, I feel like...
Do you think that he doesn't like women? Obviously. Excuse me, sir. I hate to bother you, but do you think that this is a murderer we're dealing with?
Do you think that these girls were murdered?
Do you think that he does not like women?
Do you think that these women died?
Do you think that he's murdered more than once? That's it, true. And every time there is somebody murdered, they go, do you think it's likely that he's going to do it again? Obviously, he's done it 4 times already, you dingbat.
Honestly.
Anyways, that was their question. Do you think could it be that he was a maniac? Yes. And the police officers, they think they're so clever because they are They're trying to convince the murderer, we're going to catch you. And they say, I have her diary. I'm going to go through every name in her diary.
Whose diary?
The Patricia, who died in her flat.
Oh,
I'm going to talk
yeah.
to everyone she names in her diary. I was like, mate, you got 4 random people killed. I don't think she's writing about him in her diary.
Yeah, literally. And I do not talk about random people that I meet on the street in my diary.
And especially if you are a sex worker, you're not writing about each encounter in your diary.
Well, no. For God's sake.
Anyway, they also find boot and footprints in the blood, and they prove that the body has been staged because they kind of move around, walk back to the body after she's died, and then move her so she's lying a certain way, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But what it tells them is that the print is the same as that of Emily Jackson. So now we know it's kind of all adding to the fact that this is the same person.
Yeah. And it's the
Now,
same print, not just the same size.
Yeah. No, it's the same print and the same size.
Oh, damn.
Oh, God, you just people in this time. I don't know. Like, when I think of the 70s, how long ago was the 70s?
That was like 50 years ago.
Okay, but when you say the 70s, how long do you think it was ago?
Oh, I think it was like 100 years ago.
See, I don't. I think the 70s were obviously just in the early 2000s, so it was like 25, 30 years ago.
No, I think of like an age ago. I'm thinking way
now
later.
that I've watched and heard and listened and read to these people, it's freaking lifetime ago, because
yeah,
we now have a young girl called Jane McDonald, and she was a young girl. She was 16 years old, and she lives at home with her parents. She works in a supermarket. She was not in any way a sex worker. So now they're like, uh-oh, what's going on? Now people start to care. And her body was found, this is so traumatic, by other children in a nearby playground. And she had been hit with a hammer, and a broken bottle had been stabbed into her chest. So it was really, really horrific. But now people are really scared because they're thinking, well, hold on a minute. Before it was sex workers, so I was safe. And now it's just anyone. It is still really near to Chapeltown, which is the red light district. But there was no reason why she would have been targeted other than the fact that she would have been a young girl walking alone by herself. This is now making people more worried. And she is described as the innocent victim. Implying that the others, not so innocent. Yeah. Oh my God. You meet Wilf and Irene, who are her parents, and they're obviously devastated. And
why did you say it like that?
Because people talk to them and they're so stupid. People are like, oh, how are you feeling after this has happened? Are you joking? Like, their child has just been murdered. What are you talking about? Yeah. And then the doctor who treats Wilf and Irene, because they have like family doctors. We were talking about Harold Shipman and family doctors. Yeah. And they go around and he goes, oh, well, Wilf's very upset. Had to give him a sedative this morning because this is an awful lot for a man to put up with. What? Whereas women, we're just, built for our children being murdered.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, for goodness sake.
But what this does mean is that now it's going to get a lot more attention nationally and locally. And this is the first time, actually, that the national press are even interested in this case. Yes. Now, at this time, it's really, really hard for them to find any DNA evidence or anything. And the only thing that would really be going on is they can ID blood groups if they find blood.
Yeah.
But even then, the most common blood group is O, and guess what percentage of the population is O group?
Are you going to say like 60?
50%. So even if they found, a blood group, it's not we're dealing with 5-6%. We are dealing with a huge proportion.
Yeah.
And then there's a couple of different factors which add into this. Firstly, they were adamant from the beginning it was a man.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that they immediately assume it's a man? I mean, it is a man.
I guess because it's I mean, I guess in the 70s, I'm not even just in the 70s. I think that the majority of murderers are men to start with.
Yeah,
And
but
you
they
don't,
don't ever look at women.
yeah. But I
I
guess
just think, can you imagine if it was a woman?
yeah. I mean, it would be smart, be
It would
clever.
be.
Because I would I immediately thought that this must be a man. I never, and it's the
Yeah,
same with Jack the Ripper. Nobody ever assumes that it was a woman.
yeah.
Jack, because he was, well, first of all, he was called Jack the Ripper, but why not Jane the Ripper? Like,
Mm.
you don't, people just, I guess it's just the assumption, isn't it? And I like to think that if a woman was going to commit murder, she would murder men. Because,
Yeah, come on, guys. Even the playing field a bit.
yeah, literally.
They're always the targets. They really up police presence, which I understand why you are increasing police presence, right? But it's the middle of the freaking day and you've got 20 police officers lined there with their pointy heads.
Yeah.
I don't think that the Yorkshire Ripper's kind of like, I'm going to find someone now.
No, exactly.
I don't know, I just felt like there was no idea of going undercover. No, like,
let's plant someone or
as a prostitute,
yeah.
let's go to Chapeltown and sit and wait at night and watch them
None of that.
and see who turns up. No, none of that. Later they do something, but no, nothing. So they write a letter to the Ripper.
Classic. Yeah, that'll get him.
In the Yorkshire Post. You have killed 5 times now in less than 2 years. You have butchered 5 women in Leeds and Bradford. Your motive, it is believed, is a dreadful hate for prostitutes. A hate that drives you to slash and bludgeon your victims. But inevitably, that twisted passion went terribly wrong on Sunday. An innocent... I don't know why they're trying to make him feel bad. Do you think this man cares?
No, literally.
An innocent 16-year-old lass, a happy, respectable, working-class girl from a decent Leeds family crossed your path. How did you feel yesterday when you learned that your blood-stained crusade against streetwalkers had gone so horribly wrong, that your vengeful knife had found so innocent a target? Sick in the mind though you undoubtedly are, there must have been some spark of remorse as you rid yourself of Jane's bloodstains. Can you imagine him being like, oh, do you know what, you're absolutely right, I did not mean to kill her. Didn't realise she was a respectable lass from a working-class Leeds family. So sorry about that.
So, you know what? That's my bad.
Do you know what? I crossed a line there.
Yeah. Oh, for goodness sake.
Crossed a line.
You can imagine him just like pacing, being like, what have I done?
Damn it! We now are in July of 1977 and a woman called Maureen Long was attacked in Bradford. Rose, where's Bradford? I thought Bradford was just outside of Manchester.
No, it's like closer to Leeds.
Okay, so we're still close to Leeds. And she is struck on the back of the head. So she's hit and she is stabbed quite a few times. They say 4 or 5, and I thought, you are the medical examiner reporting on this. Should we not be a bit more precise than 4 or 5 times?
You would like to think, yeah.
They say that she is the first Ripper victim to survive, but I actually don't think that's true because there's quite a few that have later been put down to the Ripper and they just don't mention them. And I think they don't mention them because the police didn't do anything with it, which makes me think they don't want to embarrass themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, didn't that other lady who survived in the phone box?
Yeah, but do you remember the police officer was like, no, blah, 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 you're not telling the truth, it's not the Ripper. And so they don't mention her when they're being interviewed, which makes me think that they don't want people to think that they ignored this woman who did a composite sketch of the man.
Yeah. So they're saying that this woman is
they're
the first
saying
one
that this woman is the first one because this is the first one that they actually used to try and catch him. So I think they're just picking and choosing the bits that make them look good, if I'm honest.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And so they think, great, we're going to use her. Now, you've got this woman who's gone through this horrific attack. Absolutely horrific. How do you think you would go about sort of speaking to her, getting the information out of her? What would be kind of your tactics?
I mean, I'd be quite nice about it. I would be like nice and
quiet room.
Yeah, Yeah.
Yeah. At her own pace.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what they do is they decide to get one of the police officers who has the most yellow teeth I've ever seen in my life. Like, they are this yellow. Imagine
Stop
that.
it.
That's what it's happening. They say to him, here's £15. We want you to take her to the place where she met the man who attacked her. Have drinks with her. Pretend you're a couple. And if she sees the guy who did it to her, point him out. That's how we're going to deal with this.
That's what we're going to do. Okay.
And this police officer's like, £15? That's not going to cover the drinks. I spent £78 that night. I was like, what is happening here? What is this nonsense? And she gets drunk, because obviously police are paying for your drinks.
Yeah.
And
I would do the same.
But also, what's your guarantee that she's going to go, excuse me, Bugs Bunny man, that's him over there. What's the guarantee that she's not going to freak out and run away, or
you just
go
call
kicking
him Bugs Bunny man? You're funny.
I couldn't think of anything else with the yellow teeth. No, although Bugs Bunny has white teeth.
Just big teeth.
He doesn't even have big teeth, they're just so yellow.
No, but the Bugs Bunny has big teeth.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, this is their plan, and it is a ridiculous plan. And
yeah,
do you know what the police officer said?
Stupidest plan that I've ever heard.
Do you want to know what the police officers, what the police officer said, and then what the journalist said?
What?
The police officer said, there wasn't a lot in her head about anything. And then the journalist said, she lived, but unfortunately not to tell the tale. This woman had brain damage from her injuries, and she could not remember anything. She remembers at 11:30, she goes into the Mecca, which I don't know, because they called it a discotheque before. I was like, isn't Mecca bingo?
I was just thinking Mecca bingo.
And lots of men are buying her drinks, great, live your best life. And then she gets her coat on and she leaves, and that's all she remembers. So what on earth was the point of this giant charade of getting her drunk and taking her out to point him out? And then the journalist over the news report goes, she lived, but not unfortunately to tell the tale. What is happening?
I mean, first of all, it's disrespectful. I hope that man got fired. Or at the very least...
No, they say all kinds of ridiculous things. I've written down so many ridiculous things they all say.
Are you serious? Like,
they said
that
wasn't
guy
a lot
never
in her
got
head
any...
altogether. No!
Yeah, that's so...
Rose, they're not even pointing this out as though it's problematic. They're putting it in documentaries and in things, like, as though it's just an absolutely A-OK thing to say. They're not saying, oh, listen, no.
They're not even, like, so even when they're documenting on it now, they're not saying the police and journalists
the same journalists.
Jackasses.
No, they're still interviewing the same police and same journalists today.
No way, and they're still saying these things.
Yeah.
Oh my sorry.
There's so many worse things.
I'm mad.
Then we have a police officer, and he goes, we then decided to go undercover. And I was like, great, brilliant. We've got some interesting police work going on. Yeah. Are they going to pretend to be something involved in the sex trade and be walking around and luring this man in? Two men, they sit in a police car and in the middle of this area, and every time a car drives past with a man in it, one of them calls out the number plate and the other man writes it down.
That's them going undercover.
That's their undercover operation.
That sounds like the most pointless undercover operation I've ever heard of.
Do you know what they do with those number plates? They never mention them again.
They probably wrap their fish and chips in it.
So the thing I will say is, in the police office, what's it called? Police office? Police station. They have this giant wheel. Like, imagine a lazy Susan.
Oh yeah, I love a lazy Susan.
Massive, right? And
Right.
all around it, they have index cards or revision type cards, and all the information they get goes on these cards. So it's quite clever. Let's say, for example, a tip comes in, and you have Joe Blogs, and they'll go to their Big Lazy Susan and they'll find the surname Blogs, and they'll find Joe and they'll say, oh, okay, yeah, what information do you have to add? And they'll add the information onto his card. If there is no information on him, they'll start a new card on him. So then let's say, for example, the police go out and they find a number plate and they link that number plate to Joe Blogs. They'll then come back and write on that index card, we saw Joe Blogs drive through this area at this time. Right?
Okay.
Then the reporters are speaking to the police again, and do you want to know the next question that they ask them?
Do you think he's going to strike again?
Close. Do you dread there being another murder?
Oh,
No,
for
Larry.
goodness sake!
I quite look forward to it, actually.
I actually cannot wait to find out that I have failed my community yet again and somebody dies. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
Now we finally
Wait. But what did the police actually respond to this? Because I feel like they're also idiots.
They just go, yes, I do. No, I don't. They're also dipsticks about the whole situation.
Yeah.
Imagine being like, no, do you know what? If he wasn't killing, I'd be out of a job. So actually, Larry, I quite look forward to them. I don't know why it's called Larry in my head. We now go to October 1977 and we finally meet a man who, he's emotional. This is, or could be, a huge, huge break in the case.
Mm-hmm.
There is a sex worker called Jane Jordan, and she goes missing when she's seen meeting a client, and she then goes missing. Now, 10 days later, in Manchester, her body is found in an allotment. How far is Manchester from Leeds? So if Leeds is here, Manchester's here, right?
It's probably like an hour, I'd say, driving.
But it's a bit further than all the other victims that they've been dealing with.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah, it's further away. Bradford and Leeds kind of go hand in hand, whereas Manchester is, definitely a little bit further, for sure.
Yeah. And one of the things that is talked about later is a whole new heap of motorways. Really good connections have been built in the recent-ish years, and people are using these motorways to connect the country far more than ever before, and that does become important later.
Now, wait, so that was all happening in the 1970s?
It'd be happening in the... Yeah, if you think it's, when the Industrial Revolution started, it was a lot more railways and boats
and stuff,
but then more recently they've started building these huge motorways so people can get across the country a lot faster. So maybe not super recent, but let's say in the last 40-50 years. Now the guy who is working on his allotment with a friend, they are putting up a shed, and he rolls his wheelbarrow over something, and he then realises that it was a young woman, and he is traumatized. He's talking about it and he's just traumatized, and he says her hair had been burnt off, her breasts had been cut off, her bowels had been cut out, and her face, he says, was just completely broken.
Oh God.
This tells the police a couple of things. So firstly, it's showing that the killer can travel. He has access to a vehicle or to a way of getting around the country.
But didn't we already know that he had a car? Because he was picking up all of these people.
Yeah, but it means that he's travelling far and wide. Like, some people, they stick to their own grounds. I think there's psychology with serial killers of some people stick to where they know. Then you get some people who want to travel to avoid being caught. If you think about a serial killer like Israel Keyes, who... set it up so he could travel through into different states so he wouldn't get caught. They're basically saying we now know that this guy is prepared to travel anywhere in the country. And the other thing is she has been severely disfigured. This is really awful. And there are some wounds that look like they've been made later than the first wounds. So what they realise is her body has been taken there, the killer has left, and then come back when she's dead and hurt her again. Now, at first, they don't really know why,
But she was dead.
Yeah, she was dead. But they now work out why. They say that it seems, because her stuff had been emptied out, that he had wanted to find something that he'd left behind. He went back to find it and realised he couldn't find it. They go through her stuff, and in a secret compartment in her bag, they find a brand new £5 note. Now, £5 was apparently the rate for hiring a sex worker at the time. And I didn't realise this, but you can really, if it's a brand new note, you can really, really narrow down where it came from. And the killer obviously knew this. Yeah. Because they worked out that this £5 note only came into circulation 4 days before her death. And
what?
they can narrow down, because you think nothing is done on bank transfer at this point. So you're paid in cash, everything.
Yeah. But I mean, the chances of picking up a note that was like issued 4 days ago, like that is bad luck on the Yorkshire Ripper. Bad luck. Well, yeah,
if the police actually found anything with it. Stop. They narrow it, well, they're not, but they are. They narrow it down to the areas where they think it's been. And so they then go and interview factory workers in those areas who would have been paid their wages from these banks.
Right.
They interview thousands of people. But they don't find anything. And at this point, there's a lot going on in the country, lots of strikes, huge amounts of inflation, people are struggling. Little did they know that they actually interviewed the murderer at this point. Yeah. And he provided an alibi for the date of this murder. What was his alibi?
He was gardening.
They had interviewed him and he said that he'd been at a family party. They checked this out and they agreed that that was the case. However, I don't see how that can be an alibi because I don't feel like you know exactly when she died. She went missing and then her body was found 10 days later. But to me, that you can't pinpoint the exact hour that she died. So if you're putting it in a 24-hour window... Anyway... They have interviewed him, and they don't know that they have interviewed him at this point.
But he's a factory worker?
No, he's not a factory worker.
Oh, I thought you said that you...
But, okay, when I say factory worker, I'm saying there's also companies and depots and lots of places that hire a huge amount of people.
Yeah.
We then have Marilyn Moore. They admit that she was a survivor of one of his attacks because they then actually end up using her, which, surprise, surprise, previously they didn't want to do with the other woman. But Marilyn Moore, she was attacked, and she describes being hit twice, and then he runs away, gets back in his car, but as he goes to drive away, his back wheels are skidding in the mud. So they now have tyre marks. So now we've got footprints and tyre marks. Still, nothing to link it to, but they will be able to use them in comparison later. What they can get from her, though, is a description of the man in order to be able to do a composite sketch. He's around 30. He's got dark, kind of, I don't want to say curly, but like floofy hair. Do you know what I mean?
Floppy.
So it's quite thick, quite thick hair and a beard. Oh my God, I don't really have a huge amount to say about her, but Angela Gallup is in this episode.
Who's that?
Do you remember Angela Gallup?
No.
She's part of a forensic team. She was very important in a previous case of mine. The Pembrokeshire murders.
Ah,
she was the one who found the little spot of blood on the shorts.
Yes.
Anyway, she goes to the next crime scene. So we are now in February of 1978. And we have a young woman called Helen Ritka.
1978, so this is 3 years later.
Still going on, yeah.
Bloody hell.
Helen Ritka, she was 18 at the time, and she was a twin. Now, these twins had had a really, really difficult upbringing, and eventually they had gone into foster care. And after foster care, they had gone into sex work to try and make ends meet, survive,
Yeah,
whatever it is.
literally anything.
The police at this point, they say, oh, we're going to try and talk to the foster parents, and we're going to use her twin sister to try and make her seem, they don't use this term, but make her seem more human. You know,
What?
they want people to be able to identify her based on, oh, look, she had a family and a sister, and this was da 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 da, because they feel that they're
So,
not getting any help because these women are sex workers.
but they're just basically exploiting the grief of this
Yeah.
family. Okay.
And the fact is that the sister wants to help and whatnot, but the big thing that they should be doing is stopping the press from printing headlines such as "Good Time Girl," because that's what they
Yeah.
said about Wilma. They published her in the newspaper and they said, "Oh, she was a good time girl," and I just think, shut up.
Yeah, that's doing more damage, really, at the end of
Exactly.
the day.
But they managed to come up with, the police and businesses and whatnot, they come up with a £30,000 reward, and that's a huge amount at the time. And so, as you can imagine, who calls up? All of the angry wives, the girlfriends, and the psychics. And they log every single call that comes in, but nothing that's very useful at this point that they can do anything with. We then have Yvonne Pearson. Now, she's kind of an anomaly because her body's a lot more hidden. She's actually found underneath an old sofa on a waste ground. Now, this was just so tragic because it's like, you just don't care at all. You've literally put her in with rubbish, you know? And she had disappeared 2 months prior, and she's then found. We then go on to May of 1978, and we have Vera Millwood, and she says to her boyfriend that she's going out to buy cigarettes. But instead, and she was also a sex worker, instead she was picked up, bludgeoned as she got out of the car of the man who had picked her up. And after she had died, he had dragged her body over to the grounds of Manchester Royal Infirmary and then stabbed her repeatedly. So he had specifically dragged her into an open area, like where she could be seen. There's no bushes, there's nothing to hide her. She is in the grounds of a hospital. At the time that this happened, there were 800 people in the hospital, between staff and patients. 800 people. There are floodlights over this area. No one sees anything.
What? What time of day was it?
Bold and brazen. Obviously, it's at night, but the fact of the matter is, like, I don't know, it's floodlit, and I mean, hospitals don't go to sleep. Even when, exactly, like, I'm in hospital, if something was happening outside, you would hear it, you would notice it.
Yeah.
I don't know, I just think it's so strange. And then a letter arrives to the detective in charge, and they think, okay, we've had so many hoaxes, but this one they feel slightly differently about. The reason they feel slightly differently about this one is because it talks about Vera Millwood, the last victim. And it says that prior to her death, she had been a patient at the hospital, and the police are thinking, oh my goodness, this is true. She had had several operations in the hospital before her death. Now, how would the murderer know this? Is my thing. Unless he talked to her about it in the car.
Or unless he was also a patient at the hospital.
Unless he was a patient.
Doctor at the hospital.
Or, I don't know. And they managed to identify... Pardon?
Did he work there?
No, you don't know yet. Don't worry about it.
Oh, okay.
I'm just giving you options, right? And then they find out that he's a bee secretor. Do you know what that means?
No, what does that mean?
Me neither. But apparently everybody secretes different DNA types or something. I just think the word secretor is gross. Like,
I thought you were talking about like bumblebees, and I was like, that's a really weird job to have. How would I?
Sorry, no.
Like, how would I have guessed a bee secretor?
So when he's licked the envelope to send this letter, because he's licked the envelope.
Gross.
They find out that everybody secretes a different something. I don't know. Maybe there's like M secretors. I'm really not sure. But he is a bee secretor, and only 6% of men have this. So we're, you know, yeah. We now have a letter. We now have quite a lot, really. And then a tape arrives. Now, this letter, he signed himself off as Jack the Ripper. He's calling himself Jack the Ripper. Yeah. So then a tape arrives, and it is addressed directly to George, I can't remember his surname, who is in charge of the whole police investigation. So they're talking directly to him. And this is what it says. I'm Jack. I see you are still having no luck catching me. I have the greatest respect for you, George, but you are no closer to catching me than 4 years ago when I started. I reckon your boys are letting you down, George. I'm not quite sure when I will strike again, but it will definitely be this year. Maybe September, October, maybe sooner if I get the chance. I'm not sure where. Maybe Manchester. I like it there. There's plenty of them knocking about. They never learn, do they, George? At the rate I am going, I should be in the book of records. I think I'm at 11 now, aren't I? It's been nice chatting with you, George. Yours, Jack the Ripper.
And this was a tape recorder, like a...
Yeah. And they think he sounds like he's kind of got a Geordie accent.
Which is from... Because some people don't know Geordie. Okay, good.
Newcastle.
Newcastle area.
This becomes really, really important.
So he didn't use like a voice scrabbler or anything like that?
Nothing. So now,
he didn't even try and hide his voice?
No.
Cool.
But it's been 11 months since the last killing, and we're now in an area that is not a red light area. We're in quite a well-off area. And we have Josephine Whitaker. She's 19 years old, and she is found in the playing fields. And now people are thinking, okay, this is getting further out of these red light areas. This is becoming more dangerous. The police are saying, women, don't go out at night. Nobody's safe. Don't go out alone. But you're right next to a big university, and you're at a time, the 70s, where women are thinking, you can't tell us what to do. We've got the contraceptive pill coming out. Women are starting to have more control over their bodies and over their rights, etc. And we then have Barbara Leach, who was a student, and she was walking home after a night out. And these journalists are so victim blamey. They're like,
hate them.
She decided to leave her friends and walk alone. I was like, ew, shut up.
I literally always used to walk alone at university.
Yeah.
Didn't mean that.
So she's walking home at night back to her university, and she is killed on her way home. So they ask Barbara's mum, how are you dealing with it all? That's their question to her. How are you dealing with it all? And honestly, and it's so weird. I really understood the sentiment of the next bit, but it was also such a weird question. Like, the dad says, oh, for her funeral, her mum bought a new outfit and it was a bit expensive. Like, I raised my eyebrows at how much she'd spent on it. But then the dad does go on to say, she feels that she's buying an outfit not just for her funeral, but for the wedding day she'll never go to, the graduation she'll never go to, the birth of her children, So I do kind of understand that one, but I just thought, between them asking about, like, oh, this is too much for a man to manage, and the man being like, oh, she spent a lot on her clothes, shut up, all of you.
Yeah.
But the universities are now obviously panicking, and they're providing buses for women to get home at night, on nights out. The women at universities are now feeling, oh, I'm more vulnerable than I realised.
Yeah.
They're far more aware. And they are playing this tape in shops and supermarkets. Do you know this man's voice? Yeah, do you know this man's voice? They're playing it in buses, on top of ice cream vans, everywhere. They are playing this man's voice. They put up big samples of his handwriting on billboards for people and saying, and there's a number that you can call to hear his voice. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then someone says, I just don't think that these letters and this tape are legit. I just don't think it is. Everything in there, so this is another one of their sort of expert people, and he says everything that's in there is information that's widely available to the public. Why are we taking it at face value?
Yeah.
Why are we not assuming, we've had other hoaxes. Why are we not thinking this is a hoax?
Yeah.
But George is the lead detective and he's absolutely not. No way. This is all they've got. We are taking this and running with it, is essentially what he's saying.
Yeah,
Now
but
in nine,
the thing about her being in the hospital wasn't in the news, so that
they
wasn't
work
public
out that it
knowledge.
was.
Uh, okay.
Yeah, they work out that it was, and that's what he's saying. Okay, now we've got everything, even that thing that we thought potentially would have made it so it was more likely the
Yeah.
real person. Now we don't have that anymore.
Okay.
Now in 1980, we have Marguerite Walls, and on the 20th of August, she is walking home and she is hit over the head repeatedly with a hammer. We then have a doctor, Upadhyaya Bandara, on September the 24th, but she did survive after she was attacked.
Wait, so he's not even targeting sex workers anymore?
Women out alone at night, and obviously they must be sex workers, right?
Oh, for God's sake.
We then have Maureen Leah, who was an art student at Leeds University, and she goes out for her 21st birthday, and she's walking to get the bus, and she hears someone calling out to her in a Yorkshire accent. Hi, hey, hiya. Now, obviously that can't be him, right? Because his accent is a Geordie accent.
Yeah.
When she turns around, she doesn't recognise him, and then he's following her, and she thinks, oh, like she's panicking now. And he hits her around the back of the head and she falls forward and she's left with serious, serious wounds. She's all bruised and battered on her face. She's got a punctured hole in her skull and a severed spinal cord. She's in a really bad way. But she doesn't want people, when the doctors say to her, you were attacked by the Yorkshire Ripper, she doesn't want to tell people that because then they'll think she's a prostitute. Then on November the 5th, there is 16-year-old Teresa Sykes, and she's walking to the shops, and her boyfriend hears her screaming for help.
Wait, where's her
And he comes.
boyfriend?
He must have just been in their home. Like it's, if I walked out the door now
And then
and you were at home, you would hear me screaming.
Mhm.
And she survives, but she does have to have an operation, so she's quite badly hurt. But he managed to scare this guy off because
Did
she
he
was
see
screaming.
him?
No, but he hears her screaming and runs out, and then obviously the guy ran away. On November the 17th, we have our final victim. Her name is Jackie Hall. She is another student at Leeds University, and she is walking back to her halls. And they find multiple stab wounds. Her clothes have been taken off, and she has screwdriver stab wounds in her chest and her eye.
Okay, but the fact that that's like how many victims is that at Leeds University? That's quite a few. So
Yeah.
he's not just targeting
No.
sex workers for sure. It is just women. Like it's not that they have to be. He's assuming that they're all sex workers. Like it. These are students, for crying out loud.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this bit really made me angry. On November 25th, they get a call from a man called Trevor Birdsall. And Trevor says, in 1969, I was driving my van and my friend jumped out of the van and attacked a woman who was there and then got back in the van and we drove away. So he's not called this in. I mean, that was however many years prior. That was before all of this.
Like 10 years ago at this point. 1969, he said.
Yeah. And the man who he says is his friend who did this is
from Newcastle.
No. Still not arrested.
Well, yeah, obviously not, because you didn't say anything about it.
No, he calls in on November the 25th. He calls in after all these women have died. He calls in and he says, I think my friend might be a suspect. But you didn't call in when he was like just attacking women.
Yeah.
So now we are at January the 2nd, 1981, and the police see a man driving around and they pull him over. And in the passenger seat there is a woman and they say to him, what's her name? And he has to admit he doesn't know. He doesn't know her name. They then realise that he is driving a car that has false plates on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they decide that they're going to take him in for questioning. But before they take him in, he's like, oh my God, I'm absolutely busting for a pee. So they let him go around the side of this wall and go for a pee. And then they take him in for questioning. And while they're questioning him, one of the sergeants, who's called Robert Ring, what a good name. It's like something out of a Marvel thing, isn't it? Like Bruce Banner, Robert Ring. And he feels his, like, spidey senses are going off. Like, he's like, something's going on. So he goes back to where they had arrested this man, and where this man had gone for his pee, like round the back of this wall, they discover that he has ditched a hammer, a knife, and a rope. So this man that they found in a car with a sex worker, that is what they've left. They then discover in the cistern of the toilet in the police station, they find another knife.
What about a Phillips screwdriver?
No Phillips screwdriver.
Oh.
The cistern, am I right? That's the back of the toilet, isn't it?
Yeah.
The bit you take off to put the nice smelly stuff in. When they confront the man with this, he does start to admit to the murders, but
What?
Yeah, he doesn't care. He says, the women I killed were filth. He calls them bastard prostitutes who were littering the streets, and I was cleaning up the place a bit.
What?
So his name is Peter Sutcliffe, and he had quite a rough upbringing. Not that I'm condoning any of this, but I do think it's like cycle of abuse. And his dad is very violent towards his mother, and he just adores his mum. Like, has the most amazing relationship with her, just loves her, and he's really mocked and teased for how much he loves her. And then he goes to school and he continues to be bullied and teased and tormented over these things. When he was a child, his dad pretends to be someone else, lures his mum to a hotel, and he takes the children to show the children that his mum is having an affair. And he takes two of the children, Peter is one of them, and Peter just breaks. Like, he is so sad that this has happened, and he's lost, like, his person.
Yeah. And he's lost faith in her as well, you know, like...
And in women.
Yeah.
And then when he's 15, he goes and he's doing, like, a load of odd jobs, and one of the jobs that he really, really, really enjoys is grave digging. Weird. And I don't understand people who do these jobs.
He just enjoys it. That's like such a weird thing to say, like that he enjoyed it. Like that's like saying that I enjoy, like, I don't know, dumpster diving, you know? That's not something that you enjoy. That's
But also
weird.
Also, I don't understand people who have these jobs. Like, imagine being someone, oh yeah, I am going to work in a morgue.
Yeah. But imagine
And not being like a forensic scientist. I understand that, but being the person who does like the embalming of bodies.
But it's one thing to work, because I mean, someone has to do these jobs, you know. But then to like say that you
enjoy it,
grave digging is a bit of a stretch. Yeah,
he would have done great in Holes.
Yeah, he would. I love that movie.
I love that movie. I think that movie's better than the film. Sorry, better than the book.
Really?
Yeah, it's one of the few. But that's interesting because when he is then arrested, he said that he was being told by a voice in his head that he had to kill these sex workers. And he also says that he was told this by a headstone when he was grave digging. So he says
a headstone.
Yeah, like the dead person under a headstone when he was grave digging. That's who told him he needed to kill these people. But you know, like the police have gone on and on about, oh, people don't care about prostitutes and blah, 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 blah. There are so many times that he could have been caught and that the police didn't listen or pay attention as well as they should have. So in 1969, that attack that his friend later reported, he basically claimed, Peter Sutcliffe claimed, that there was a prostitute who owed him money. He couldn't find her. So he just found another woman, he was 23 years old at the time, found another woman, jumped out of the van, hits her in the back of the head with a rock inside of a sock. It's like, it's a rhyming thing. It's not funny. A rock inside of a sock, hits her in the back of the head. They know who's done it. 2 police officers go to his house and they say, don't do that again. You're very lucky that she's not pressing charges against you.
What?
So then 5 years later, when all these murders of prostitutes are happening, did you not think, oh, maybe the man who attacked a prostitute 5 years ago, in the back of the head, when all of these women are being hit round the back of the head,
In
maybe
the
we
back
should
of the
look
head. Yeah, and
Yeah,
they didn't, not even.
no.
And
And
then
they're like,
it
oh, you're
wasn't.
so lucky that she's not pressing charges.
But then his friend brought it up again, and then
Years later, though.
but then they didn't even connect
Still
that
didn't
then.
arrest him then, no.
Stupid.
Okay, and then July 5th, 1975, we have another woman who was a Woolworths worker.
Oh, I
Remember
love
Woolworths?
Yeah.
Now, I don't know why they didn't talk about her. They said that she was hit with a hammer and slashed with a knife. It didn't kill her, but someone found her bleeding and she underwent emergency brain surgery and she did survive. We also have on August 15th a woman, she's 41 years old, she's called Olive, and she's distracted by someone and they're talking to her about the weather and blah, 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 blah. And she is hit with a hammer and slashed across her lower back with a knife, but again was interrupted and so didn't kill her. She gave evidence to the police, including the detail that her killer, or attacker, sorry, had a Yorkshire accent, but it was ignored. And they were like, oh, when the tape came out, he must be a Geordie, even though we've got someone saying that he had a Yorkshire accent, it was ignored.
Wait, so was that him, the tape?
No!
It wasn't him in the end?
It was
or
never him.
the letter?
No, so they're ignoring all these people. Sorry, did I not say that? They're ignoring these people who are saying it's like a Yorkshire accent because they're like, no, it's not. It's a Geordie accent. We've got it on the tape. And that's why when that woman was walking down the road, the student, and she's like, I heard a Yorkshire accent. It actually wasn't. It was him because he had a Yorkshire accent. He didn't have a.
But she was thinking, oh, it can't be the Yorkshire Ripper because he's.
Yeah, I mean, she did
Yorkshire.
Freak out when he started chasing her, but I think he'd do that even if you didn't think he was the Ripper. But yeah, and so now you've got a time when a composite sketch was made, you ignored that and said, oh, you must be a prostitute, don't worry about it.
And that was, that composite sketch matched Peaches.
What he ends up looking like, yeah. And we also have another girl who was attacked called Tracy Brown, and she was only 14 years old. She was struck in the head 5 times, and she survived after having brain surgery. But she later says she walked with him for like half a mile before he did anything, and for like 30 minutes she said, I never felt intimidated, I never felt in danger. Like, this man obviously must have been so disarming.
Yeah.
Like, a woman invited him into her home.
This young girl
spoke to him,
yeah.
helped him with his car, all of these things. The other thing is, when he killed Marguerite Wells in 1980, he had been out on bail for drunk driving when he killed her. So he had been arrested and then was released on bail, and that's when he killed someone. Like, there were so many opportunities. They interviewed him. So many things happened. There was evidence that they ignored. And I'm not saying that they didn't work hard at the case, but I do think that guy could have called in, his friend could have called in and said, my friend attacked a sex worker. And I think, like, even after the first murder, you call and you say that. The other thing is the police ignored information.
Yeah.
And they interviewed him and they said they thought that a family party was a good enough alibi. No, it's not. And they said that when they spoke to him, like, he was charming and lovely and there was no issues whatsoever.
Yeah. But I mean, a lot of the time, psychopaths are charming and lovely. That is
literally
that is
one of
the definition of a psychopath.
Exactly. He pleads not guilty, but he was sentenced to 20 consecutive life sentences.
Wait, he pleaded not guilty even though he confessed to the fact that he killed everybody?
I think, and I actually don't know, but I think it was kind of, they're calling it murder, and I think he genuinely believes this whole I was cleaning up the streets thing. I really do, because he's like, yeah, I did that, but I was doing God's work and everyone should be grateful to me and thankful for what I did.
Fuck off.
He's honestly such an
Just got like a God complex.
Yeah. And a superiority complex.
Yeah, for sure. Wait, so you never told us what he did for a living?
Oh, he was a heavy goods vehicles driver. So one of the companies that they went to talk to the owner was a haulage company. And the fact that he could drive cross country, he used that because he was going between places so he could kill people, dump the bodies, he could travel between areas, he could be out of an area very, very quickly after something had happened.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't look suspicious. You know, if every time someone dies, your next door neighbour does the off, it looks suspicious. If your next door neighbour is a heavy goods vehicles driver and leaves every time, you know, every other day, you're not going to think anything of it.
Yeah.
I feel like I didn't tell this story very well because there's lots of things that you're asking me about, and I'm like,
no, but it's fine because we're still covering it.
He was sentenced to these 20 consecutive life sentences, and he ended up dying of COVID in 2020, November 13, 2020, which I was a bit gutted about. I thought, he should have probably had a bit longer in prison. You know? Yeah. Like, I'm sad.
I mean, he must
died.
have had, 40 years in prison?
Yeah, but I just think he should have just died in there. I would have liked to see him get old and suffer in there.
Yeah.
If I'm honest. And
true.
I was one thing I was reading, which I thought was really amazing, was his name Richard. Do you remember right at the beginning, Wilma's son, who was 5 when she died? He actually reached out to the family of the murderer and was like, I know what he did was awful, but I'm not consumed by that anger anymore. And I also understand that this must be difficult for you. Like, you've lost a sibling, and that must be really hard when he died in 2020. And I thought, that's so nice. You're such a big person. I can be nice to the family because you're not the monster. I get that. Yeah. But I'm not sorry your brother's dead.
No.
I suppose there is something nice for the families of the victims if they outlive the murderer. I just wish he'd suffered a bit more.
Yeah, like had.
And also, COVID. What is with this hoax people? Like, stop.
What hoax people?
The people writing weird letters.
Oh my god!
What is with this?
Like, the police must have put so much money and resources into blasting that tape everywhere and trying to figure out who sent this tape and saying this is the man. Like, so much wasted time.
But also, I think
money.
that was a bit stupid. I don't know why they so readily accepted that.
Well,
there was nothing in that tape that made it so that it was.
I mean, I guess at first they did think, oh, nobody knew that Vera was in.
No, but that was in the letter. That wasn't in the tape. In the tape, it was just like, hey, George, what's up? I might do this again.
I just don't. I'm sure we've said it before. Like, I don't understand what people get out of that. You know, like what
I don't know. It's so weird.
Crosses your mind. Like, I could never imagine reading a news article about somebody who was missing or trying to catch a murderer and thinking, you know what, I'm going to sabotage this entire investigation and that's going to be my Sunday afternoon. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
What I also don't understand is, okay, people are desperate for, like, the reward money, right? But you're not even doing it for the reward money.
No, you're just doing
it. If you're sending in a tape, you're not even doing it for reward money.
No, you're just doing it because you want to see these people hurt. Yeah.
Literally, ew.
Ew, David.
Ew, David. Oh my god, I love Schitt's Creek so much. Okay, well, thank you so much for listening to my episode. Are we doing your episode now?
Yeah, I can do.
Anyway, thank you so much for listening to our podcast. Please go and follow us on everything. Rosie's going to put up pictures of all of her creations. I think I'm going to finish one of my knitting creations. I think I started one last year and it's sort of half done. So I might finish one of those. Thank you so much. We are 26tolife_pod on Instagram and TikTok. And we are 26tolifepod on Spotify and YouTube. Subscribe. Say nice things. It means the world to us. Look at this woman. She's finished 2 scarves.
I've not finished it yet. I've still got a lot of stuff.
You could join it at the end and make a snood.
Super, super long. Oh. Wow! Okay, bye!
Bye, I love you.
I love you!